This episode of the Endpoints of View podcast is brought to you by SentryBay, home of the armored client, the world's most advanced endpoint protection.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's deep dive. You know, it's pretty fitting that we're doing this now because it happens to be smack dab in the middle of International Fraud Awareness Week.
Oh, yeah, right. That's the week when everyone gets to think about all the ways they could get their identities stolen.
Exactly. But really, though, this week is all about awareness, raising awareness about fraud and how to protect ourselves, and that's what we'll be getting into today.
You bet. It's a huge issue, and for good reason. The sources you sent really highlight the growing problem of fraud, especially in our digital world. We're talking financial losses, damage to your reputation, and of course the always looming threat of identity theft.
No kidding. And one stat that really hit home for me was the average cost of a data breach. Get this, in 2024, it's hit a mind-blowing $4.45 million.
Wow.
I mean, that's enough to make anyone want to just give up and hide.
It's a crazy number for sure, and you might think, oh, that's only a problem for the big corporations, but the truth is, these breaches can be devastating for small and medium businesses too.
Yeah, I bet it's not just the money either, right?
Absolutely not. The sources actually go into this, and there are some real-life examples that are pretty scary. Like, there was this case study about a small manufacturing company. They got hit with a data breach and ended up losing a big contract. The client got spooked about the security of their intellectual property, and it caused this ripple effect. They had to lay off employees. Morale went down the tubes. They really struggled to come back from it.
Man, that really shows you how far-reaching the consequences can be. It's way more than just dollars and cents. We're talking about trust your reputation, the very survival of your business.
Exactly. And for us as individuals, the impact of a data breach can be just as bad. Imagine your identity getting stolen, dealing with all the fraudulent charges, trying to clear your name, rebuild your credit. That could take years to recover from.
Yeah, it makes you want to ditch all your devices and live off the grid. But before we all run for the hills, let's talk about how we can actually fight back against these threats.
Okay, so here's where things get interesting. Because while we usually focus on external threats, like those hackers lurking in the shadows, there's another big risk that we often forget about. Insiders.
Insiders? You mean like those employees who are disgruntled and want to sabotage the company?
Well, that's one type of insider threat for sure. And those situations can be pretty dramatic. But you know, a lot of insider risk actually comes from unintentional actions. Things like an employee accidentally sending a confidential file to the wrong email address, or clicking on a phishing link that lets malware in.
Oh, right. Those small mistakes can turn into massive problems.
You got it. And the sources have some pretty alarming examples of what can happen. We're talking employees or contractors with inside access. They could be letting in bad guys for profit, messing with financial systems for personal gain, or even selling customer data on the dark web. It's scary stuff.
It really does make you realize how important a multi-layered approach to security is. You can't just build a wall around your organization. You have to be aware of those vulnerabilities from within.
You said it. It's all about creating a culture of security awareness, training everyone to spot threats, and putting safeguards in place to prevent breaches, whether they're intentional or not.
Okay, so we know the threat is real, and it's coming at us from all sides. But how do these fraudsters actually get in? What are some of the tactics they're using, particularly in this world of remote work and cloud-based operations?
Yeah, the sources point to three main threats that are especially relevant today: keylogging screen capture and malicious injection.
Those sound pretty intimidating. Let's break them down one by one. Starting with keylogging. I have to admit I don't know much about it besides the name.
All right, so imagine this. Someone is secretly recording every single keystroke you make on your computer. Every password, every credit card number, every confidential email, all being captured and sent to the attacker. That's keylogging in a nutshell.
Whoa, so it's like having a digital spy looking over your shoulder 24/7. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
But how do they even get this keylogging software onto your computer in the first place?
It can happen a few ways. Sometimes it's through malicious attachments in emails or downloads from shady websites. Other times it might be physically installed if someone gets their hands on your device. The scary part is it can be really hard to detect because it often runs silently in the background.
So once that keylogger is on there, the attacker basically has access to everything you do on that device.
Pretty much, yeah. They could potentially steal your login's financial info, personal data. Anything you type is fair game. That's why it's so important to have good endpoint security solutions, something that can detect and block keyloggers. And of course, practice good password hygiene and use multi-factor authentication whenever you can.
Okay, endpoint security. That's a term that comes up a lot when we talk about cybersecurity. What exactly does that mean?
It's basically how you protect all the devices that connect to your network. Think of it as a security blanket for every point of access to your organization's data. Your desktops, laptops, phones, even servers. They all become potential entry points for attackers.
So it's not just about protecting the network as a whole, it's about securing each individual device that connects to it.
Exactly. Especially now with so many people working remotely, employees are accessing sensitive data from all over the place on all kinds of devices. So endpoint security is more crucial than ever.
Okay, so key logging is like a digital spy recording your every move. What about screen capture? How does that one work?
Screen capture is more straightforward. It's basically taking a snapshot of your computer screen at any given time. So even if you're super careful about what you type, someone using screen capture can still see what you're looking at.
Yikes. So if I'm working on a confidential project or reviewing financial data, or even just checking my online banking, someone could be watching and capturing all of that.
That's the risk. It's like someone peeking through your window and taking pictures of everything you're doing inside. And it's not just limited to individual devices either. Attackers can use screen capture to monitor whole networks. They can capture sensitive info being transmitted across the entire organization.
This is making me paranoid just thinking about it. How do we protect ourselves from this kind of spying?
Again, strong endpoint security solutions are key. Look for tools that can detect and block any unauthorized screen capture attempts. And of course, being mindful of what you have on your screen, especially during virtual meetings or when you're working in public, that can help reduce the risk.
Right. So always be aware of your surroundings, both physical and digital. Okay, we've covered key logging and screen capture. What about malicious injection? That one sounds especially technical.
It is a bit more on the technical side, but it's a very real and dangerous threat. Imagine injecting harmful code into legitimate software or websites. It's like a digital Trojan horse sneaking in and wreaking havoc.
So you might think you're interacting with a trusted website or app, but behind the scenes, this malicious code is doing its dirty work.
Exactly. It can steal data, disrupt systems, even take control of your entire device. And the worst part is it's incredibly difficult to detect because it often hides within legitimate programs.
So how do we protect ourselves from this kind of sneaky attack?
This is where things like regular code reviews, web application firewalls, and secure software development practices become essential.
I'm hearing a lot of technical terms. Can you break that down for those of us who aren't tech wizards?
Sure, code reviews are basically like having someone carefully examine the software code. They're looking for any vulnerabilities or hidden malicious code, like having a building inspector check the foundation of a house before you buy it. Web application firewalls act as a barrier between your website or app and the outside world, blocking any malicious traffic before it can reach your system. And secure software development practices ensure that security is built into the software from the ground up.
Wow.
This makes it much harder for attackers to find and exploit vulnerabilities.
So it's about having a multi-layered approach, baking security into every stage, from development to deployment to ongoing maintenance.
Exactly. And of course, endpoint security solutions also play a crucial role. A good one can help identify and block suspicious activity at the user level. This prevents malicious code from running, even if it gets through other defenses.
It seems like endpoint security is a recurring theme here, and for good reason. But before we go deeper into that, let's switch gears a bit and talk about another concerning trend in the world of fraud, the rise of AI-powered attacks.
Right. While AI has the potential to revolutionize so many things, it's also becoming a powerful weapon for cybercriminals.
So how exactly is AI being used to commit fraud?
Well, for starters, AI is making it easier than ever for criminals to create fake identities. They can use AI algorithms to generate completely synthetic profiles with names, addresses, social security numbers, even credit histories.
Wow, so these aren't just your average fake IDs. These are sophisticated digital identities that can be used to open bank accounts, take out loans, and commit all sorts of financial crimes.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just financial fraud. AI is also being used to create super convincing phishing emails, forging documents, and even impersonating people using voice cloning and deepfakes.
Deepfakes, those things where you can make anyone say or do anything on video.
Yep, that's right. It's becoming harder and harder to tell the difference between what's real and what's fake, which makes all of us more vulnerable to these AI-powered attacks.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is kind of mind-blowing, but instead of getting overwhelmed, let's focus on what we can do to fight back. The good news is AI is also being used to combat fraud.
Really? So it's like a digital arms race. The good guys and the bad guys both using AI to try and outsmart each other.
That's one way to look at it. Financial institutions and cybersecurity companies are using AI in amazing ways, detecting fraudulent transactions, identifying fake accounts, even predicting potential attacks before they happen.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's hope that we can use AI to stay one step ahead of the criminals.
Absolutely. But it takes vigilance, awareness, and a commitment to staying informed about the latest threats and solutions.
Well said. It's clear we need to have a much deeper conversation about endpoint security and how it can help us navigate this crazy and constantly changing threat landscape. Okay, so before, we were talking about how important endpoint security is in this crazy world of cyber threats. And honestly, it still feels kind of like a mystery to me. Can we break it down a little more?
Yeah, for sure. Endpoint security can seem pretty complicated, but the main idea is actually simple. It's all about protecting each and every device that connects to your network, from laptops and smartphones to servers, and even those IoT devices.
So it's not just about having a strong firewall around the whole network anymore.
Nope, not anymore. Think about it with all the remote work and cloud computing these days. That traditional network perimeter is a lot more open than it used to be. People are accessing sensitive data from coffee shops, airports, home offices, you name it. And each one of those devices becomes a potential way for attackers to sneak into your network.
So it's like every device is a little door that needs its own lock and key.
That's a great way to put it. And that's exactly where endpoint security comes in. It's like having a guard at each of those doors, always watching for anything suspicious and stopping threats before they can get inside.
Okay, I like that analogy. So what does a really good endpoint security solution look like? What are the must-have features?
Well, one of the most important things is real-time threat detection. Today's endpoint security solutions use the power of AI and machine learning to analyze data spot patterns and catch suspicious activity as it's happening.
So it's not just about reacting after the damage is done. It's about stopping threats before they can actually cause a problem.
Exactly. You need a system that's always on guard, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Think of it like a digital immune system that's constantly searching for signs of trouble.
Okay, that makes sense. So real-time threat detection is key.
Yeah.
What else should we be looking for?
Another crucial piece is multi-layered defense. It means combining different security technologies to create overlapping layers of protection. Like, you might have a firewall to block unauthorized traffic antivirus software to catch and remove malware, and intrusion prevention systems to stop suspicious activity in its tracks.
Got it. So even if one layer fails, there are others in place to catch the attack.
Right, like a medieval castle with its moats and walls and archers makes it a lot harder for attackers to get through.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. Real-time threat detection, multi-layered defense. What else?
Well, good endpoint security solutions also use behavioral analytics. They analyze how people normally use their devices and data, so they can spot anything that deviates from those usual patterns. Those deviations could be a sign of an attack.
So if someone starts accessing files they don't usually touch or trying to log in at strange times, the system will flag it.
Exactly. It's like having a digital detective constantly looking for clues. This can be really helpful in catching insider threats, both the malicious ones and the accidental ones.
You mentioned accidental insider threats earlier. Can you give an example of how behavioral analytics might help in those situations?
Sure. Let's say an employee accidentally downloads a file that has malware in it. Behavioral analytics might notice that the file is acting weird, like trying to get into sensitive data or talking to external servers. It could then automatically quarantine the file and alert the security team, and that would stop a potential breach.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It's like having a safety net to catch those honest mistakes before they become huge problems.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's patch management. This means keeping all software and operating systems up to date with the latest security patches. It might seem boring, but it's super important in preventing breaches.
So those annoying software update reminders are actually important. I have to admit, I'm guilty of ignoring those sometimes.
I know it's tempting to hit remind me later, but those updates often have critical security patches that fix known vulnerabilities. And hackers are always looking for ways to exploit those weaknesses. So keeping your software up to date is like locking your doors and windows at night.
Good point. It's easy to get lazy when you haven't had any problems, but better safe than sorry.
Exactly. And a good endpoint security solution can actually help automate the patching process. Makes it easier for IT teams to keep everything secure.
So it sounds like endpoint security isn't just about technology. It's also about people and processes.
Absolutely. Even the fanciest technology won't help if employees aren't trained to recognize threats and follow best practices.
Right. You can't just rely on technology to fix everything. You need to have a culture of security awareness in your organization.
Exactly. Employee education is crucial. You need to train your people on how to spot phishing attempts, create strong passwords, report anything suspicious, and just generally be mindful of their digital footprint. And this can't just be a one-time thing, it needs to be an ongoing process.
So regular refreshers, reminders. Simulations basically keeping security top of mind for everyone.
You got it. You want to create a culture where everyone feels responsible for security, not just the IT department.
Makes sense. And what about proactive measures? What can businesses do to find those weak spots before the attackers do?
Regular fraud risk assessments are essential. This means taking a good hard look at your organization's security, finding any potential weaknesses, and coming up with plans to fix them.
So it's like proactively hunting for those vulnerabilities before the bad guys get there.
Exactly, like having a security consultant come to your house and check for weak spots, checking the locks on your doors, making sure your windows are secure, finding any blind spots that a burglar might use.
And I imagine having a solid incident response plan is important too.
Absolutely. No matter how good your defenses are, there's always a chance of a breach. A well-defined incident response plan makes sure your organization can act quickly and effectively if something happens. You can contain the damage, recover lost data, and get back on track as fast as possible.
So it's like having a fire drill for cyber attacks. Knowing what to do in an emergency can really minimize the damage and chaos.
That's a perfect way to put it. Having a plan, practicing it regularly, and making sure everyone knows their role, all of that can make a huge difference in minimizing the impact of a breach.
All this is really helpful, and it's clear that endpoint security is a crucial piece of the puzzle when it comes to protecting ourselves from fraud. But earlier, we were talking about the rise of AI-powered fraud. And I'm curious to know more about how AI is being used on both sides of this battle.
It's fascinating, really. AI is being used by both the attackers and the defenders in more and more sophisticated ways. Like while criminals are using AI to create fake identities and super convincing phishing emails, security companies are using AI to analyze mountains of data, looking for patterns and anomalies that could point to fraudulent activity.
So it's this constant game of cat and mouse,
Yeah,
both sides using AI to try and outsmart each other.
you could say that. And this is where the conversation about ethics and responsible AI development becomes so important. We need to make sure AI is being used for good, to protect people and organizations, not exploit them.
That's a really important point. But before we dive into the ethical side of things, let's talk about some specific examples of AI-powered fraud that are happening right now. I think hearing about real-world cases can really bring this to life.
Good idea. Let's start with deepfakes, which we touched on earlier. Those AI-generated videos can be so realistic, it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake.
Yeah, I've seen some of those deepfakes online, and they're crazy. It's scary to think that someone could create a video of you saying or doing something you never did.
Exactly. And the technology is getting better all the time. In fact, there was a recent case where criminals used deepfakes to create a video of a CEO. He was authorizing a fake wire transfer. The bank employees fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And the criminals got away with millions.
Wow, that's terrifying. It seems like deepfakes could be used for so many bad things. Spreading misinformation, manipulating financial markets, even blackmailing people.
Absolutely. And then there's voice cloning, which is another area of AI-powered fraud that's growing fast. With just a few minutes of audio, criminals can create a synthetic voice that sounds almost identical to the real person.
So you could get a call from someone who sounds exactly like your bank manager or your boss, asking for sensitive information or authorizing a fake transaction.
Exactly. And it's not just phone calls. Voice cloning can be used to create fake audio recordings, mess with voice assistants, even impersonate people in online meetings.
This is all pretty overwhelming. It feels like we're always trying to catch up to these super sophisticated criminals.
I know it can feel that way, but it's important not to give in to fear or complacency. By staying informed, taking proactive steps to protect ourselves, and pushing for stronger security measures, we can make a difference.
I agree. We need to be vigilant, proactive, and informed. And speaking of being informed, I think it's time to talk about specific steps, things that individuals and businesses can do to protect themselves from these AI-powered threats.
Definitely.
So we were just talking about some pretty scary examples of AI-powered fraud, and it's obvious that this is a threat that's changing all the time. What are some practical things that people and businesses can actually do to protect themselves?
Well, the first step is just being aware of what's out there. You gotta understand how AI can be used for bad stuff, like making those deep fakes and voice clones. Once you know the risks, you can start figuring out how to deal with them.
Right, knowledge is power. But knowing about it isn't going to stop a deepfake from showing up on my social media.
True awareness alone won't do it. You need to take action to protect yourself. For example, be careful about any unexpected messages you get, especially if they're asking for personal info or want you to make a financial transaction.
So even if I get a call from someone who sounds exactly like my bank manager, I should double-check before giving them any information.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask questions, verify things through different sources. You can even hang up and call them back using a number you know is legit.
Good point. It's easy to let your guard down, especially if someone sounds really convincing. What else can we do to stay ahead of these AI scams?
Another important thing is to be critical of what you see online. Don't just believe everything that pops up on social media or in videos. Ask yourself, could this be a deep fake? Or is this info coming from a reliable place?
So it's all about being a little skeptical and doing your own fact-checking.
You got it. And don't forget, you can use technology to your advantage too. There are AI-powered tools out there that can help spot deep fakes and other manipulated stuff.
It seems like AI can be used for both good and bad.
Definitely a double-edged sword. That's why it's so important to talk about ethics and responsible AI development. We need to make sure AI is helping society, not hurting it.
I agree. We have to think about the potential consequences of AI and create safeguards to prevent people from abusing it.
I'm with you on that. And this is something that everyone can be involved in. Learn about AI, speak up about your concerns, support organizations that are promoting responsible AI development.
Well said. This deep dive into fraud awareness has been really eye-opening.
It's a complicated world out there, and it's changing all the time.
But I think we've done a good job of explaining the main threats, highlighting some practical tips for staying safe, and maybe most importantly, starting a conversation about the ethical implications of AI.
Yeah, and hopefully we've given our listeners the tools they need to be more aware, more cautious, and more proactive in protecting themselves.
Absolutely. So to sum it all up, stay informed, stay curious, and stay safe out there in the digital world.
And remember, knowledge is your best weapon.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into fraud awareness. Until next time.
This episode of the Endpoints of View podcast has been brought to you by SentryBay, home of the Armored Client, the world's most advanced endpoint protection. For more information, visit sentrybay.com.